can be able to view it later. Great. So once again, welcome everyone to the Open Mapping Partnerships Roundtable. It's hosted by the Open Mapping Hub Eastern and Southern Africa, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. And we've been holding these sessions for the last about 3 months. And each month we focus on a specific impact area. This time around, we are focusing on disasters and climate resilience. And many of you on the call working within this sector, your work that you implement and do is in this area. And so we'll be hearing from some groups and organizations this afternoon. So we'll be sharing quite a lot with you, and we look forward to interacting with you. So prepare your questions around how these different organizations are actually using maps and map data. So let's move on to the next slide. So this afternoon, we have quite a number of lightning talks that are lined up. These are really brief ones where each of our presenters will be speaking about what they do in this space of disasters and climate resilience. And I think they are inspiring stories of how they are doing their work. We will be discussing that. So after which we'll have discussions and networking. Would like to get to connect as practitioners in the disasters and climate resilience sector. So get ready to engage and share what is working for you as you respond to disasters. In case you've not yet added to chat, please just add your name and where you're joining us from. We'll really be looking forward to connecting further and knowing you as well. On the next slide. So today we have an amazing group of facilitators. We have Wilson Mnyarazi, who is joining us from the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, the Open Mapping Hub in Eastern and Southern Africa. Wilson leads for us the disaster services work that we're doing in Eastern and Southern Africa. And so he will be speaking to us about what the hub is doing and what HOT in general is doing and working on in the region. We have Gumbi, who is the data lead from Malawi Red Cross. And we'll have also Dolly, who will be joining us from OSM Madagascar. We also have Callisto, who is joining us from the Scouts movement. He leads resource mobilization and sustainability in sub-Saharan Africa. And we also will have discussions coming in from Zainaba and several other colleagues. And we really would like to hear what you are working on and doing in the region. So when we get to that stage, just feel free to go ahead and link up with us and open up your microphone and be able to speak to us. So our next presenter is going to be Wilson. It looks like, let me check if he's here.
Yes,
Wilson.
he's here.
Okay, excellent. So Wilson, I'll hand it over to you to take us on, and he'll be speaking about what the hub is doing in the region. We'll have him for the next couple of minutes. So Wilson, over to you. Wilson, over to you. Can you unmute?
Oops. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's very clear.
Fantastic. Okay, first of all, I would like to start by introducing myself. My name is Wilson Mnyarazi. I'm the Disaster Services Manager with the Eastern and Southern Africa Open Mapping Hub based in Zimbabwe, Harare. So in this session, I'm going to take you through several slides where I'm going to explain what we do as the ESA Hub within the region. First of all, for your info, the ESA Hub covers 23 countries in the region, that is in Eastern and Southern Africa. So the first slide that you see on the screen is asking as to why disaster services in Eastern and Southern Africa. There are several reasons that have brought us to, to this forum where we would like to look at disasters particularly. There are several natural hazards in the Eastern and Southern Africa region affecting so many people. And most of you must be very, very aware that in the past couple of months, beginning of this year, we had cyclones, floods, and droughts affecting most of the countries in Africa, particularly in Madagascar and Mozambique, Malawi, as well as Zimbabwe, where over 100,000 people were affected by Cyclone Ana, Batsirai, Eminati, and Gombe. This prompted the ESA Hub to work in collaboration with the OSA Madagascar, South Sudan as well, to open projects and task manager to do some mapping response within the affected areas. In Madagascar, a total of about 72,000 people were displaced in 98 sites during this period, which is a very sad situation. In South Sudan, the floods also affected over 100,000 people. And we also managed to work closely with the community to come up with projects to map most of these areas impacted. At the moment, currently, we have the Durban floods, where you all have heard that 306 people have died, and there's been widespread damage to buildings, transport, infrastructure, electricity, and water because of these floods and landslides. And as you are well aware from the risk index, it shows us 13 of the 23 ESA Hub priority countries have high risk or very high level of risk according to the Global Informed Risk Index. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Our role as ESA Hub, one of the priorities of the Open Mapping Hub Eastern and Southern Africa is to support, assist, and connect local communities and partners in the disaster management sectors. This, I'll keep emphasizing, we are doing it through creating networks and partnerships amongst communities themselves and disaster agencies across the region. And the main goal in this aspect is to make sure that each and every institution, organizations, or communities are harnessing from the open source data, which we generate through the OpenStreetMap. Next slide, please. How we engage. As the ESA Hub, we have always strived to make sure that we create partnerships. And our main focus area is to coordinate with any key and interested parties within the region, making sure we prioritize and support local actors. We also build partnerships, capacity, for local communities in all disaster phases. We also build and strengthen the Hub's relationships with national and regional partners. Why regional partners? Because we feel we cannot do this kind of work alone. We really need to engage our regional partners within the region so that we make sure that whatever efforts that we are doing and their efforts as well, they complement each other. We also maximize on the use of OSM data in disaster management. Next slide, please. Our anticipated impact. We believe local communities are the first responders when a disaster strikes. And because of this, we are striving to elevate local expertise in communities to independently lead local response where possible and appropriate in coordination with local and national emergency management agencies and local government partners. We're also trying to make sure that open mapping communities and the open mapping hub support geospatial data provision in disaster management. I think the key aspect here is about communities being able to independently lead local responses. And this is exactly what we are trying to do through these partnerships and trainings that we are conducting in various sections of the region. Next slide, please. How the hub supports this. We thrive on partnerships where we would like to develop and build relationships and networking, be it regional, national institutions, and local communities. We believe these partnerships will play a very pivotal role in making sure that our work is well coordinated with other disaster partners. We also support and assist mapping activities in all phases of the disaster management cycle, be it mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. We also build capacities within several institutions through creating sustainability by providing these capacities to communities themselves and partners as well. Why we do this? We want to ultimately make sure that communities and partners are using OpenStreet and other free open source tools for disaster management. We also provide technical support for the communities and partners in using OpenStreetMap and other free open source tools. This is meant to maximize or enhance the use of OSM data in disaster management. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. How do we do this? As HOT and the ESA Hub, we have what we call our activation protocol. This is quite a huge document which we came up with several pages on how we engage when a disaster strikes. So the activation protocol has several phases which we follow when a disaster strikes, which is phase 1, determining the response, phase 2, response activities, then phase 3, activation conclusion. I think I'll just give an explanation of each of these phases, phase 1, 2, and 3, and how we work at the ESA Hub. Phase 1, which is determining response. This is when we do perform what we call an event size up. Event size up is collecting information which usually we get from the Global Disaster Alert and Coordination System and also Disaster Ninja. This information helps us to determine humanitarian impact. This is number of people affected, availability of data, e.g. satellite that we can mobilize at some stage, and also to see and estimate capacity to assist, that is on the HOT side, as well as the community side. This helps us to determine the appropriate response at each given time. That's when we declare an activation. Then under phase 2 of the protocol, which is response activities, we try as much as we can to maintain comms, manage mapping activities themselves, and also manage technical issues. By technical issues, you find we have project manager. By project managers, I refer to those people who would have created project within, say, the disaster manager. They have to be on alert as they work with our global validators to make sure that instructions on the mapping platform are being changed or adhered to make sure the data that we produce is of high quality. Then phase 3 of the activation, which is the conclusion. On this one, we mainly review map data and usability. After reviewing this gives us a platform to plan long-term support and capacity building, because we are literally having feedback from the communities and data users and most of our contributors across the world. After this, we then conclude the activation. After the activation has been concluded, maybe I will lead you through how this works within one of our most important tools within HOT called the Task Manager. Next slide, please. Every day, a global community works tirelessly behind the scenes to make more complete map of the world. The resulting work is open data that can be used by anyone. And for you on that slide, I'm showing you the Task Manager as a tool which we use to divide large mapping projects into smaller tasks that can be rapidly mapped by so many people. It is an interesting tool because some of you, I'm sure, who are well aware, they've already used it when we host mapathons. Hundreds of mappers can jump in at the same time, and each one connects to a single task and starts mapping. And as you see on the right side, the green boxes show finished tasks that have been mapped. And the white blank ones, those are the ones that are still available for mapping. That's a screenshot of Durban floods. And quite a number of those tasks you see were mapped this last week during the mapathon. So it is one of the interesting tools that we use within the ESA Hub when we activate disaster mapping. And we support this tool and onboard so many institutions who are interested to be onboarded to the Task Manager as well, so that they can make use of it to generate data at a very fast rate so that it can be used for disaster response. I think that's all from my side. Thank you. Over to you, David.
Thank you so much, Wilson, for that presentation and speaking about what you do and what the hub does in the region. I have two questions that came in that I probably we can go into them right away. Within the disaster response area, let's say, we have a question here from Hawa. Are there any specific examples of communities the hub is currently supporting? What level of support is also provided? Wilson, can you get to that?
Yes, true. There are quite a number of communities that the hub is supporting at the moment. I think if you're well aware, we have issued some open mapping grants recently, which was still following up. That is in several countries: Namibia, Malawi, Uganda, Kenya, and we are really pushing this front towards supporting communities themselves. I hope that answers you.
Okay, great. And yeah, also to add to that, the engagement with different communities and mappers and organizations continues. So we'll continue to engage and support quite a number of mapping groups and communities. So we encourage everyone to keep an eye out on our mailing lists or the newsletter or Twitter and social media. We'll be sharing more information about that as we go along. And just one more, then we'll move to the next slide. Wilson, we have a question from Brian. He's interested in the data you use, let's say you use for your maps, for the maps. What are the sources? Are there any common data pools that you use? And where are they based? Who pulls this data together? Who brings this data together? And yeah, this is his interest around the data that is used for disaster response.
Thank you very much. Yeah, like I said, when we do an event size up, this way we try to determine whether there is baseline information or the baseline map needs to be improved. So the next thing that we do is to establish whether there is available satellite data. And we take advantage of Maxa imagery, which is one of the sources of data that we use when we want to do remote mapping. We also use the Esri data, which is also one of the platforms that we use. Also use even Bing itself. It depends on the quality of the imagery. So at most of the mapping, we do a selection of the best quality, and that's the one that we select to use for our mappers.
Yep. Yeah, amazing. And one more that I could add to that, Brian, is that the data that we generate, and we encourage our partners and the volunteers that we work with, global pool of volunteers, is all open data. We add that to OpenStreetMap. So the data that is generated through, say, the events that we support, or the mapping that is responding to disasters, is all added to OpenStreetMap. There is a slide that was speaking about the tasking manager. That's the tool that we use to mobilize mapping events by different volunteers. We also work with different organizations to set those mapping events up. The data that is generated through all of that is open data, which is added to OpenStreetMap, that you can as well access, download, and use in your work. So the data sources for sharing this data, how open are your data sources to sharing the data with other organizations offering complementary services? I can take that up. Our data, well, we can't even say it's our data. The data that we generate is out there. It's owned by everyone, added to OpenStreetMap. Maybe we may set up a task to map, say, a particular location in Malawi. Once that is added to OpenStreetMap, that data is owned by everybody. So you can go in there in OpenStreetMap, download it, and use it in your application, in your with the activities of your organization. So that's that. And one more from Stella. Is the hub open to partnerships as they come in, or do they have a specific onboarding timeline? So I handle partnerships at the hub, and if Stella, this is in terms of disasters, we really, and either in disasters or even any other way of collaborations, we don't have like a timeline. Once we connect with an organization, or an organization that is interested in partnering with us, we advance conversations and we explore how we can work together. There isn't any specific timeline. It depends on how we discuss and evaluate how we can all work together. So it's open. We are really open. And if there's any organization, any government agency, any group that is interested in working with the hub, you can reach out. We'll provide details of reaching out to us later on in this call, and we can initiate that conversation. Okay, so keep the questions coming. We will answer those questions as we go along. Right now, I'd like to hand over to Callisto, who is joining us from the World Organization of the World Organization of the Scouts Movement. Yes, I got it. So Callisto, over to you.
Thank you, David. Greetings to everyone. Happy to join you today. My name is Callisto Chieng, and I work with the World Organization of the Scout Movement here in Sub-Saharan Africa for the Africa region. So deep into the presentation then. So maybe the first question is, who are we? And I know even here we have those who've been scouts. So scouting is just a an educational youth movement, and it's the largest in the world with 57 million young people. And if I go specific, in Africa, we have 40 countries that are members in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa alone. And out of these 40 countries, we have around 4 million members that are young people that enjoy scouting. And in all these, our mission is simply to contribute to the education of the young people. And this is done through a value-based system, through a specific scouting methodology that focuses on values, promise, and law to create a better world, in that they are able to, play a constructive role in the society. And this is characterized into 6 strategic priority areas. And the first one is the youth engagement. As a youth movement, that's a key priority for us. And then the educational methods, which basically highlights how they are able to learn the different skills that they are exposed to. And then diversity and inclusion, which simply exposes scouting as open to everyone. And then social impact, which will be my focus today, where we have scouting and humanitarian action. And then, of course, communications and external relations and good governance. So today, out of the 6 priority areas, our focus is on social impact, where we have a program called Scouting and Humanitarian Action. It's not particularly new, but pretty new, because scouting is more than 100 years old, but this area came into much existence in 2017 as a key area. Although scouts have been part of different things, response, you remember disasters way back during World War, all those things, the disaster in Haiti, all those things that have been happening, they've been scouts doing different things. But we've been able to put focus into it since 2017 as one of the areas that scouts are putting so much effort into, and therefore must be recognized. So being a key thematic area, then we've been able to develop a number of resources to be able to champion that idea as a key area. And these, we have guidelines, we have manuals, we have action kits, just to help in the capacity building of the member national scout organizations, but also the scouts who work in this area at the local level. One resource that I want to highlight that is relevant to this topic today is what we call the vulnerability assessment matrix. It's what we use to help each member country to, assess their level of vulnerability, or the, just trying to measure the probability of occurrence of disasters, and then when it occurs, how do they respond to them? So a response then comes in the other one, which is the standard operating procedures, which defines then if something occurs, what do scouts do? How do they respond? What activities do they take part in? And this has seen very many national scout organizations, or NSOs, if you may, respond to disasters and emergencies over the last 5 years. This has increased a lot. Next slide. So how do we respond to disasters? This is a question that is interesting, because one unique thing about scouting is that they are not situated in a particular place. Scouts are all over the world. In Africa, they are all over the countries. So when something happens, they are not gathered that you call so-and-so to come. Wherever something happens, you might find 1 or 2 scouts there. So they're able to swing into action pretty fast. So in the event of an emergency, the World Organization of Scout Movement response is completely dependent on whether that country is engaged or plans to engage in response activities. at a local or national level. So for us, at this office level where we sit as a secretariat, for us to be involved, that country, for instance, our office is situated in Kenya, but before we get involved, the country office in Kenya must first get involved. So how do that happen? We rely on the response trigger. And this trigger can be done in 3 ways. One is that country, the National Scout Organization says, this and this is happening, and we are planning to do this and this, or we're already doing this and this. So when that is reported, we are able to swing into action and support them. Or at our office, by checking the different monitoring mechanisms that we have, if something happens, then we are able to connect with that country and tell them, we can see this and this is happening, then how can we be of help? The last one is through level 3 emergency. This is mostly for large impact disasters that when it happens, you find mass action going all over. So as scouts, we are also, that's a trigger for us. And when this happens, then that we depend on the data that we get from the ground. For instance, when cyclone was happening in Madagascar, for example, we were able to, they relayed the information to us. So from us, we are just to check how are they responding to that disaster. So we get back to them and see what are they doing. What is the impact of that disaster? How many people have been affected? How much of the population is affected? And then what are the response areas that the scouts are engaged in? When that happens, then we have enough data and information that we can base our response on. And then our response are in different things. We have the donation platform that we set up to support the different emergency situations. Then we have also something called Messengers of Peace Emergency Funds, where each country, the moment they are affected by disaster and they reach out to say this is happening, then they are entitled to a maximum starting emergency fund of $10,000 to help them respond to a disaster. But if it's a large scale disaster occurrence, then we go to the next level, which is called the Scout Aid, which on top of the first emergency funds, then we roll out a large scale mobilization of funds through our different channels. Apart from this, it can be as simple as just a consultancy. Let's say a cyclone is happening and we have no capacity to respond. So it could be as simple as just training them on what to do at that particular time. It could be, for example, what we do with Kenya and Malawi in response to refugee situation. And it's about the non-formal education support to these refugees because they've been there for a long time. So it's about supporting their livelihoods. And when they get out of the camps, what happens next? So such kind of consultancy. Lastly, the last part involves partnership. Definitely in disaster response or in humanitarian work, you can never work alone. So we also work with different organizations and partners to do all these things that we do. So how do we use maps and data? Mostly we use the Global Disaster Alert and Coordination System to monitor the different disasters if they happen. But we also use our own vulnerability matrix to map out within the countries to know the possibility of something happening, the chances and how much effect it can have, and then the response that can be done. And with that, then we are able to determine from the impact, what are the needs? What do they need to respond to that particular situation? And through that, then all that data that we develop a response plan. Of course, we have a contingency plan in advance, but then we develop a response plan for that particular situation when it happens. Yes, next one. Okay, so some of the outcomes and outputs from using this, then as I said, we've been able to, we have a pool of resources that we've been able to develop over time. And these are just one to be able to support the development of capacity of our members to be able to respond to disasters when they occur, but also to mitigate, being able to map out before it happens, the possibility and the response that could be done. And also we have a network of a humanitarian action network that apart from the continuous capacity building, then we rely on them to be able to assess the situation on the ground. And when something happens, then they are able to coordinate the response at the country level. With this, then we've been able to be, scouts have been able to, take part in different responses of the disaster that have occurred in the past. As late as recently with COVID-19 response, we've seen a lot of actions by the scouts. One unique one where I highlighted this is, for example, the scouts of Niger, who worked with UNICEF to be able to do a research and map out the impact of COVID-19 on the livelihoods of people. So that highlights the importance of scouts here. We also have a response to refugees situation in Kenya, Malawi, and Niger. And that is sometimes when disasters take long, like in the refugee situation where they stay somewhere for years and years, people tend to withdraw and forget. And therefore, ours is to come back and say, then if you are here for this long period, and we are educational movement, then what forms of non-formal education can we offer to these people to be able to move on with life? We've been able to take part in the cyclone response in Madagascar, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia. In all these depends on the data that we get from the ground or the impact that it has had, and then we formulate a specific response to that. Most recently, floods in South Africa, and that has been also floods in South Sudan, where scouts have been able to support based on the data that we get from the ground on the impact of the floods, and then formulate response mechanisms to be able to help people. And in all these, what are the lessons that we get from them? That having a reliable network is really important. You can have great resources, documents, policies, but when you have no people to implement them at the grassroots level, then the impact would not be felt as much. They will just remain to be documents on your websites and everything. When also disasters occur, it requires financial muscle to be able to respond. And for us as scouts, we've been able to use more of the crowdfunding through our Scout donation platform and the Messengers of Peace to, get the funds that are needed for these responses. And as I said before, in humanitarian work or disaster response, it can never be a one-man show. And therefore, partnership is important. And that's why we are also excited to be part of this team today, to just learn from others and know how we can work on this going forward. Eventually, having a plan is important. Whether you want to have it as a contingency, planning ahead, or planning when something occurs, having a plan is really important. So for us, we rely on our standard operating procedures, which highlights what to do when different disasters occur. Then finally, you can see some of the pictures down there of some of the scouts in action. The first one being COVID response, the second one being floods response in South Sudan, Then the third one being cyclone response in Madagascar. And the data has been used much in South Africa. That's why I put there as a case study. And that is because they've been able to train their scouts. So for them, they even do open street mapping. And they were introduced by our colleagues from the European region who trained them on how to do this. And they've been able to, even in their latest response in the floods, they've been able to use that particular one. So thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be part of this and just learn from everyone how they be able to support those who are affected by disasters. So thank you, David.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Callisto, for that presentation and speaking about what the Scouts movement is doing in Sub-Saharan Africa. So we have another presenter coming on right now from OSM Madagascar. This is Dolly coming from that organization. It's a community of contributors, and I think they are doing amazing work in Madagascar, responding to disasters there. So if you haven't yet asked any question, feel free to add that to chat, and Callisto, Dolly, and all the others coming up will address that question or those questions in chat. Dolly, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I am Dolly Angetspirana. I am from Madagascar, and I have been an active contributor to OpenStreetMap and the OpenStreetMap community in my country since 2015. And I have also contributed in several projects involving OpenStreetMap. So I'm going to talk about OpenStreetMap Madagascar as an OpenStreetMap community. Who are we? Obviously, as an OpenStreet community, our mission is to first promote the use of OpenStreetMap and open data in general in our country, which is Madagascar. And by promoting the use of OpenStreetMap, we reach out to students at the university. We promote the use of OSM amongst individual consultants, companies, NGOs, and public stakeholders in our country. And as an OpenStreetMap community also, we aim to ensure that mapping efforts we are made within the territory of Madagascar are of the best quality possible, and that those mapping efforts respect local specificities, because most international organizations that do mapping effort in our country do not necessarily know the local context or how things are in the field. So we help them, we support them when they have mapping efforts in our country. We help them to respect local specificities. And obviously, one of our missions also to push the OpenStreetMap map of Madagascar into completeness by finding all means to complete the map, be it by individual contributions or by data imports. And to date, we have accomplished several projects around OpenStreetMap. For example, in 2017, the OpenStreetMap community in Madagascar worked directly with the World Bank that funded a project called Open Fukuntan. It is a mapping project that aimed to deliver some decision-making tool among the Fukuntan. The Fukuntan is the lowest administrative level in Madagascar. And we produced maps, we collected data, and we produced tools to help them make decisions. And after that, we also worked with the OIF in a project called Kortinov. It is a UMAP, an online map of actors of innovation, including universities that teach computing and companies that make use of technology. And if you click on the link that I have provided, you can see the map of those actors. Then after that, the community also worked directly with the World Bank on the project Open Cities in Antananarivo. Open Cities is a project related to disaster risk. And during that project, we made data collect too. We collected data on households and public infrastructures in Antananarivo. And the aim of the data collect project is to improve the resilience of the city faced to natural disasters. And then after the OpenStreetMap project, OpenStreetMap Madagascar community, we also worked with Carto NG. It is a French NGO that had some disaster risk prediction mapping project in the eastern part of Madagascar. And we worked with Carto NG to collect data in the field in order to complete the map. And one of our outstanding projects also is the mapping of bus routes and bus stops in Antananarivo, the capital of Madagascar. And we made that with very limited budget, with less than $200. The OSM community in Madagascar managed to map almost all of the bus routes and bus stops in Antananarivo. And we organize monthly meetings, and through those meetings, we offer training sessions for beginners and for advanced mappers in order to improve, to build the mapping skills. And we have initiated many individuals, students, companies, and NGOs on using OpenStreetMap. So that's what we have done and who we are. Could we move to the next slide, please? And now, how we respond to disasters. As you know, Madagascar is prone to natural disasters. Every year we have to deal with cyclones and floodings. And so our process to respond to disasters, as an OpenStreetMap community, we work with organizations, for example, on activating mapping of impacted areas. And we work with those organizations on creating mapping projects on the tasking manager, as you can see on the image below. And when the mapping is activated, we also support the mapping process. We help the organizations on completing those mapping projects into completion on the tasking manager. And still related to disasters, how we use maps and data. OpenStreetMap data is used among the community in order to estimate impacted household. As you can see on the image below, we use, for example, the OpenStreetMap data in order to find where are the households that are impacted by floods. And also we use a QGIS plugin called InnoSafe. It is a tool that helps automate the estimation of the impact of natural disasters. We have some of our friends at OSM Madagascar that are specialized in InnoSafe. Also, we use maps and data for navigation purpose in order to find places and in order to optimize missions and such. Next slide, please. So what are our outcomes and outputs today? We have observed some success on our OpenStreetMap effort. For example, one of our notable successes around OpenStreetMap is the growth of OpenStreetMap data in Madagascar. As you can see in the figure below, lately we have almost every OpenStreetMap object, be it buildings, roads, or land use in Madagascar, have had a significant growth lately. So we find that as a success. Also, the mapping skills has a lot improved in Madagascar. And one of the reasons of that skills improvement is our effort on documentation. We have made some effort on documenting country-specific mapping guidelines, and those guidelines are used by the community. Those guidelines are also used by organizations who do mapping effort within Madagascar. And what have we learned and what are our challenges? Obviously, as a volunteer community, we don't have reliable source of funding, so it still is our challenge. We have the capacity to participate in mapping projects, but the barrier is the funding. So we might need to make some effort right there on finding funding for our activities. And like everyone, COVID-19 has had much impact to us also, as we could not go on making our monthly meetings, and obviously that has an impact. That impeached the growth of the OSM community, and we have not observed much new members. And one of our barriers also is the skill, especially on OpenStreetMap Wiki. For example, on tagging, we might find many tagging that might need to be documented, but many of our community members do not have enough skill to write wiki documentations. So I think that's all about OpenStreetMap Madagascar. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dolly, for that presentation and speaking about the work of OpenStreetMap Madagascar, which is a community of contributors coming together to create map data. Now, we will take all questions at the end. Let me invite Yag to speak to us about what they are doing at I4C, as well as the regional group, that a working group that he's working with.
Yeah, thanks, David. And thanks for the invitation to have us here today in this important roundtable discussion. So I was asked to discuss a little bit about our regional anticipatory action working group. And it's maybe a little bit out of the scope of, let's say, OpenStreetMap, because the regional anticipatory action working group will focus a lot is focusing a lot on bringing stakeholders together, working in this interagency working group, with a joint purpose of making sure that we anticipate the impacts of natural extreme events. So we're looking at floods, cyclones, but also longer term events, like drought. So for example, we need a lot of information there to make sure that we're doing a vulnerability analysis, exposure, but also physical exposure, where people live, is often really the starting point when we do an analysis on country level, when starting to make a plan that we call an anticipatory action plan. So there are a lot of stakeholders working on this, and we are part of this regional anticipatory action working group, let's say secretariat, jointly with the World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization. We did a mapping of where anticipatory action actors work. We see quite a lot is happening in Zimbabwe at the moment, in Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, and Lesotho and Madagascar. A lot is happening on cyclones and floods, but in more and more we see anticipatory action happening in drought. So we created a roadmap for basically Southern Africa, the SADC region, where we envision anticipation of disasters has become an integral part of disaster risk management cycle within the humanitarian community and national governments in Southern Africa. The mission of this working group is to create a robust, harmonized multi-agency and multi-sectoral anticipatory action protocols, and that these are established and used by national governments and humanitarian community at large to anticipate the range of Southern Africa's natural extreme events. We have a lot of members at the moment, including meteorology agencies like Southern Africa Weather Service, Meteo France, OCHA, Start Network, Welthungerhilfe, UNESCO, FuseNet, Oxfam, World Vision, GBV, AOR, and PIRUA. And we're working, when we're talking about anticipatory action, at aligning different pillars. So we are talking about 4 pillars. One is the pillar on aligning anticipatory actions to make sure that the actions is aligned, have a database of actions, etc. And also harmonizing triggers in the second pillar. So really making sure that organizations, governments alike, trigger at the same moment for a similar event, so that anticipatory actions, so the events before the impacts of a natural extreme event happen, are aligned. The third and fourth pillars focus on the financing instruments, so aligning anticipatory action financing instruments, so for governments but also humanitarian actors. For example, at the IFRC we have the Disaster Relief Emergency Fund. The UN is more using SURF funding streams, and you also have like sovereign funding mechanisms like Africa Risk Capacity. So making sure that this is also aligned, and the fourth pillar is to make sure that we have evidence-based advocacy. So evidence-based from the field, from experience, from operational experiences, activation of protocols, making sure that we have clear learnings and clear benefits and added value for it. And that is the roadmap that we will roll out in the next 2 years with the RAC Secretariat. That brings me to the last part, where I want to just make sure that everyone on this platform is also aware that we're having our 5th Africa Dialogue platform on anticipatory humanitarian action. And this will take place in person in Nairobi and in Johannesburg, and also online between the 28th and the 30th of June. So in the coming weeks. If you're interested, and I'm sure it's really, really relevant, especially also for many members on this call, register to this event. I will post a link in the chat, and hope to see you over there. And thanks a lot, David, for having me on this call.
Amazing. Thank you, Yag, for speaking about anticipatory action, a very important component when it comes to disaster response as well. So that's really appreciated. If you have any questions, please go ahead and add those questions to chat. We are going to run through those questions in the next couple of minutes. And I have one more facilitator that I'd like to bring in now from the Malawi Red Cross Society. Gumbi is the data lead, and he'll be speaking to us about, there's a lot of work really the Malawi Red Cross Society's been doing around maps and mapping and the use of data in response to climate and disaster situations in Malawi. So over to you, Gumbi.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Gumbi, and I'm the data team lead for the Malawi Red Cross. I've also been a OSM contributor since 2013. So what do we do in Malawi Red Cross? Our mandate, the Malawi Red Cross Society is a local humanitarian organization established by the 1966 Act 51 of Parliament, and it is also a member of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Society. In Malawi Red Cross, we are about 141 staff members, and we have a total of 30,000 volunteers with 33 divisions in all the regions of Malawi. And we are our headquarters is based in Lilongwe, the capital city of Malawi. So our mandate is to provide relief and aid to people affected by disasters and conflict. So in Malawi Red Cross, we have long-term programs focusing on community health care, WASH promotion, community resilience, orphans and vulnerable children interventions, first aid and blood donor mobilization, restoring family links, and community integrated disaster risk reduction interventions. Next slide, please. So how do we respond to disasters? In Malawi, we have a structure that we use when responding. And at the district, we have what we call the district civil protection committees. So these are the ones that conduct rapid assessments once we have disasters like floods. Malawi is mostly hit by floods. So these are the ones that conduct rapid assessments. And once we have the reports from the Department of Disaster, the reports are shared to all the humanitarian actors, that's including us, Malawi Red Cross. And once we have the reports, we make sure that we deploy what we call national response teams. These go on the ground to conduct verification exercises and also do market assessments to identify the potential beneficiaries. So this is done within 48 hours after the disaster. And the reports from this exercise highlights the extent of damage and recommendations for short-term and long-term interventions, which are then submitted for approval to the senior management team of the Malawi Red Cross Society. So depending on the proposition resources that we have, The response is either in kind or through cash transfers. How do we use maps and data? We use maps for selection of impact areas during proposal development. And that's the link to the 510 dashboard. 510 is the Netherlands Red Cross data team. And this team developed a dashboard that is inspired by the Inform Risk Index. So from this dashboard, each community is assigned a score of the risk that it has. I think you can follow that link if you want, so that you can have more on the link. You can see what information you can get from that link. So we also use maps to show spatial distribution of the interventions that we are doing in Malawi. We also use maps to show the affected areas by the disaster. So we also use maps to show disaster-prone areas to inform focused-based financing interventions. We also do image acquisition using drones, and this we've been sharing through the Open Aerial platform. We also use data to do market assessments, and this helps us to calculate the transfer value that goes to the beneficiary during the response. And this data also help us to, in the M&E functions, to track progress of impact of the project. We are also into collaboration with the Department of Economic Planning. And this department is the host of what we call the Unified Beneficiary Registry. And this registry hosts data on the people that have very low incomes. So if we want to target beneficiaries, it's also easy to use this data that we can collect from this registry. Next slide, please. So as an organization, we have successes and challenges. And one of the successes are that for each project, we make sure that there is what we call a crisis modifier. A crisis modifier, these are funds that can be used to support those affected by disasters anywhere in the country. So the availability of this modifier helps us to be able to respond to most of the disasters. And the reports that we get when we conduct verification exercises, we also share with stakeholders to avoid duplication of efforts. As an organization, we've also embraced the use of open platforms such as OSM and ODK, and this promotes cost saving. And during the verification exercises, we do data collection using ODK, and we're also able to map those households that are affected using ODK. And with the help from the Netherlands Red Cross, we've managed to co-author and publish scientific papers. And that's just one of the papers. That link shows you, will take you to one of the papers that we published together with 510. And the community engagement also helps us to inform the beneficiary selection. So we also engage the communities. We don't just do things on our own. And from the assessment reports that we have, we make sure that they're very comprehensive, almost capturing every sector. As part of the challenges, we've been having challenges with financial service providers during the cash transfers because we were using a mobile money provider. So most of the times there's some delays in dispersing funds. So that's one challenge that we've been having. There is also a challenge of under documentation of success stories. And during floods, we have problems with accessibility, and this leads to delayed completion of the verification exercises. and consequently that trickles down to not reaching those that are affected on time. We also face problem of limited support to address the identified needs, and we also have problems when a disaster happens where it's a new area where we don't have the village civil protection committees that are not trained. So that also takes a while for us to respond. Otherwise, this is all I had from Malawi Red Cross. Thank you, and over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gumbi, for highlighting the work of Malawi Red Cross in especially responding to disasters. It's really impressive, and how you are able to use maps, especially in addressing these disaster challenges that we have that come up. So we have a few questions in chat that I'd like to point to our facilitators and presenters. There's a question for you, Callisto, asking, has the Scouts movement reached Uganda yet? This is Fiona has not heard of Scouts in Uganda. She's a student at Makerere University.
Yes, there are Scouts in Uganda, and I also know of a Scouts group in Makerere, but you can just check out their website is ugandascouts.org, or drop them an email, scouts@ugandascouts.org. Better still, since you know Uganda very well, you can pass by the Buganda Road in Kampala, and you'll find Baden Powell House there.
Nice, nice. Okay. We had another question here coming in from yeah, it was more of an appreciation, but I have one for each and every one of you, especially in responding to disasters. And I'll begin with Malawi Red Cross. When it comes to mobilizing data and contributing data, especially in the face of a disaster, how has that process been for you? How readily have you come up with data needs, and how have you addressed those? Who have you engaged? How has the process of getting the data you need to respond to a disaster been for you? So I'll pass that over to you, Gumbi, in a minute or two.
Yeah, thank you very much, David, for the question. So in Malawi, in terms of doing the assessments, we have a tool that it was developed by all the government stakeholders and other humanitarian actors. So that tool, Red Cross has managed to put it on ODK. So as we go out to do assessments, we always have a team that comprises all the sectors that respond to disasters. So as a team, we make sure that we collect comprehensive data through the use of ODK, and we're able to analyze the data as quickly as possible using that way. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Sure, sure. And Dolly, when it comes to supporting organizations that respond to disasters in Madagascar, for example, I can see several colleagues joining in from different organizations, and they've worked in Madagascar. How about, when it comes to generating that data and being able to support those agencies and organizations, how has the reception been for you? Because you are basically a community of contributors that contribute to OpenStreetMap. You generate data, you have volunteers. What has been the reception like for these different organizations, said the Red Cross, I4C, MSF, and several others, and what level of support has come in?
Okay, thank you. about supporting organizations. First, there are organizations that want to know if there are, outside of OpenStreetMap, if there are data that they can use. For example, MSF has worked with us about that when they worked in the south of Madagascar. They figured out that locality village points are very inaccurate in OpenStreetMap because those has been imported before by some projects. So we support organizations with that. If we find some data sets here in Madagascar that may be useful to them, and we work with them also if they have data that can be integrated into OpenStreetMap in order to facilitate their intervention in the field.
Amazing. Amazing. And so I have one more here for Callisto. The Scouts movement is in many countries. You're in, I think, 40 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. How are the different movement country offices using maps in their work, and also how, because the Scouts movement has not been so much featuring in the OSM community conversations, OSM ecosystem conversations, what are you currently doing and how can you be accessed to, for example, there are some groups that may be interested in working with the Scouts movement in, say, Tanzania or in Malawi, for instance. Two questions there. How is the access process for these different groups to connect with you? And then at a national level, you've highlighted South Africa. What are the other countries doing in terms of maps and mapping and the use of maps in Scouts movement activities?
Thank you, David. So for the first one, each country has an independent national office that manages scouting at national level. So what we do is connect them or liars, to connect them with different partners they can work with. But in regards to maps, I'll say not all the 40 countries have been able to utilize OSM. So this is a new field to some, and that's why even this engagement is important for us, because we are much into disaster response, but we understand the importance of OpenStreet mapping and its use, the data that is available, how it can be important in the response. So that is why we are really excited about such a platform to also learn and be able to support our members better in this area. And that means that we'd be able to reach out. I can count just a few that I know already use such data, OSM. So the majority are yet to be acquainted with this. So it's a plus for us to also get this knowledge and pass it over to them.
Yeah, amazing. And so the Open Mapping Hub in Southern Africa is actively pursuing collaboration initiatives with the Scouts movement in the region. And as we continue to engage, we'll be bringing you more of what's going on in the partnerships conversations we are having. We'll be participating quite heavily in their activities, but also opening those up for you, our partners, to engage and participate in what's going on. I think they're doing a great job as well. For a number of years, they've been in most countries doing a lot of scouting work. I've added to chat a spreadsheet where you can continue to connect and link up with several people. on this call. So please just check out that spreadsheet, add some details. We will use those details to follow up with you, and we'll be sharing our email addresses in a bit, but we want to connect with you more and more and speak with you when it comes to disasters and disaster response in your country where you operate. There are several ways you can partner with the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, with the hub in the region, and we can be able to advance your work together. Geoffrey, you had a hand up. You want to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment, just in response to Callisto's answer there, that there are also like OSM communities in the different countries. So yeah, through the hub, we are also happy to make that connection. Yeah, to link like an OSM community, for example, in Botswana with the Scouts movement in Botswana, and just get those conversations happening as well. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. So perfect. We have just a few minutes left, and if you have any questions in chat, we will definitely be very happy to answer those questions. Let's go to just one more slide about how we can get involved.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
Yes, Moyo Joel.
Yes, I am calling from Zambia. One thing is certain that this that we're hearing now is going to go a long way into helping us to understand issues of mapping. Yes, we have used mapping to determine the frequency of these disasters in certain areas. And this, working with the DMMU, which is the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit of the country, the Zambian Scout Association has been able to run to those areas that have been affected by disasters in less than 72 hours. We have had many of these. The current one, the recent one was the cyclone that affected most parts of Zambia, especially down the Zambezi River. And the Zambian Scout Association did rush there, and we distributed food to the affected areas. Yes, we used maps, just as I said, carried an assessment in affected areas also. We have used maps to come up with data on the gravity of the disaster. As I said, we have certain areas that are prone and which are always affected by these disasters. And so we stand ready at every time using maps to get to these areas immediately such an occurrence happens. Yes, we also use maps to identify the people affected by disaster. And that helps us to source for their needs. It helps us source for their needs. We always work in collaboration with the Zambia Army and the Zambia Air Force, where certain areas are not reachable, but collaborating with these defense forces has helped us to reach out to the most difficult areas of the country. We have always found it easy to get the needed staff from the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, which is a government department under the Vice President's office, and we work with them very well. The Zambian Scout Association is located, its headquarters located in Lusaka, in an area called Long Acres, and it is very close to the Zambian Red Cross Society, and so that makes it easy for us to collaborate, even with the Zambian Red Cross Society, in terms of logistics, because others are better placed. They have vehicles that we as an association do not have. And so for these mine disasters, it has always been very easy in that we have collaborated with the Zambia Red Cross Society to carry out these things and reach out to the affected people. But we appreciate what we're learning today. Was one sees that the OSM will definitely be able to give us a better understanding of what is supposed to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Moyo, joining us from Lusaka, Zambia. Amazing to know what you're doing. We are in conversations with the DMMU in Zambia, with Zambia Red Cross, and I think it's just the right timing that you're coming into the conversation of maps and the use of maps. It's amazing, and we will continue to engage and to discuss. So great, thank you for sharing what you're doing. And if there's anyone else you'd like to say anything, you could raise your hand. We will hear from you in a bit. Jeffrey, let's go to the next slide. So we have some resources that we've captured here that you will be able to access in this presentation that will be sent to you after this session. Quite a number of links within the presentation. These are all going to be very handy for you as you continue to respond to disasters in your work. Next slide. We are really interested in connecting with as many as of you working in the disasters and climate resilience sector. You can reach out to me via this email, david.luswat@hotosm.org. I lead partnerships here. Wilson leads our disaster services work. Or generally, you could reach out to isahab@hotosm.org. Maybe you're discussing a collaboration initiative, you would like to get a training in the use of OpenStreetMap tools or how to contribute to OpenStreetMap or how to access OpenStreetMap data, we can be able to support and follow up with you. We will continue to have these roundtable sessions. Our next one will be focused on public health. So many of you are doing some work again in public health. We'll be reaching out to you, and if you'd like to present, you can send me an email, david.luswat@hotosm.org, and we'll arrange a few minutes to showcase your work, and that will help us to learn quite a lot. We will be having a mapathon that is focused on mapping Liberia. These are virtual mapathons that we hold every month with the OSM network in Africa. They are an opportunity to learn how to contribute to OpenStreetMap. They are an opportunity to learn about who is mapping where and what kinds of tricks they're using to map. So we encourage you to join us in the next mapathon, which is happening at the start of July. And I'll go ahead and share a link for you to sign up for that. We'll be mapping Liberia in West Africa. And we also have a newsletter that we share out every quarter. So we invite you to sign up for that if you haven't, and be able to connect with what is going on around the Open Mapping Hub in Eastern and Southern Africa. And with that, our time is a little bit fast spent. We would like to thank you all for joining and for listening into what's going on around the disaster space in this region. We will continue to engage. We will continue to collaborate. Now that I don't see any hand, we have a hand from James. James, could you unmute and speak as we wrap up?
Hi. Good afternoon. So I do have a question for OSM. I joined the community not too long ago. I think it's been like a week or two. And basically what attracted me to OSM is the mapping functionalities and then how you can apply that practically. And from my perspective, I am coming from a mobility perspective where we are trying to connect cities and towns and then increase that level of connectivity through various intermodal transportation. Now, I know that the majority of this talk has been on using OSM for disaster management, but for me personally, I feel like without access to certain places, disaster management won't be possible. So for somebody like me that's new to the community, what do you think I'll need to learn to be able to incorporate OSM in some of my projects? By projects, I mean web and mobile applications that could harness the data, and then we could use that data to perform a host of functionality.
Great question, James. Thank you. And OpenStreetMap has been used for mobility mapping or transportation mapping in a number of locations on the continent. I see a colleague from Nairobi, Laura, who has worked on a project that was focused on transportation mapping in Nairobi. We have some colleagues from, I think, Ghana as well have done transportation or mobility mapping in OpenStreetMap. And there are a number of resources that have been developed also in collaboration with the World Bank that I think we'll share. But in terms of what you need, especially having joined the OpenStreetMap ecosystem a couple of weeks ago, first of all, orienting yourself with how to contribute to OpenStreetMap is important. When it comes to accessing data from OpenStreetMap, there are a number of tools that are available that you can use. We have developed some of those tools at HOT, like the HOT export tool. There are others like GeoFabric that you can use to access data and download that data and use in a GIS application. But if you're interested in, for example, an app that does maybe routing or navigation, again, there is an API that OpenStreetMap has that you can access and add to your routing application.
Yes. So sorry to cut you in. So basically, when you're developing an app like Uber or Yango or any of these ride-sharing apps, it's more like a navigation where you're moving from place to place. But for my use case is to sort of map out maybe two positions within maybe a city, and then probably get the street names or maybe the bus stops or stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's basically finding out how that functionality can be implemented, and then secondly, if there is extra resources for developers and maybe the programming languages, because I use C# and .NET. So something in that realm to sort of help me, because that's what brought me to OSM in the first place.
Okay. Yeah, James, thank you. I will reach out to you and share some of these links. But to one of your questions of adding places, let's say bus stop to the map, there are a number of applications that do that. You can do that directly in the OpenStreetMap platform when you sign up and you go and make an edit, which can be a bus stop, it can be any other feature. Or you can use applications like Organic Maps, which is able to enable you to add a feature on the map, which can be a bus stop, which can be a location or a shop, and several other applications that can help you to do that. We'll compile a few things and maybe we can add some resources to this very slide we have here that can speak to that.
Yeah, I've sent you my email, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we need to, we don't
I
want
think
to keep you
Pascalina
longer.
has also raised her hand.
All right, let's see. We don't want to keep everyone waiting longer. So let's hear from Pascalina and then we'll wrap up there.
Sorry, I just wanted to notify James that there's actually an organization that does something similar. He should check out Trophy Association. I think they've done some work on bus stops and then basically transportation apps.
Please, can you share a link on the chat? Or
Okay,
just
a
type
moment.
the.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pascalina.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And yeah, let's see. We don't have any other hand. We do want to end here. Thank you everyone for joining from different locations. I can see so many familiar names from the Uganda Red Cross, from from the OSM communities, OMDTZ, and everybody. We really appreciate you joining today. We'll send the slides and this recording. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us on any of these platforms that you see here. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers.